My name's Gemma Milne. I'm a Tech Innovation Strategist for Ogilvy Mather and working in their department called Ogilvy Labs. And by night, I'm the co-founder of Science Disrupt. So diving into what both of those are, in Ogilvy Mather, I work in their tech innovation sort of R&D team. So my job is to research future technologies, consult our clients on sort of why they should care. So we might have American Express say, hey, everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. Why is that going to impact my business? And it's my job to go find out and then go back and tell them. I also partner with loads of startups to make sure that our offering at Ogilvy is up to date, is news, being able to do various different things with startups and with our clients. So instead of us doing a campaign with a drone, it's not like we have a drone pilot sitting in the corner all the time. It's we have partners in that area and we'll bring them in as and when we need them. And we have these sort of mutually beneficial partnerships, making sure we know what they want and what we want and see how we can help and learn from one another. And then I do a lot of, as I say, internal research, but then I also go to a lot of conferences. I speak at a lot of conferences to make sure we're extending both our knowledge of what's going on in the world, but then also everyone knows what Ogilvy's doing and making sure that we get plugged in to various different things as and when. So that's my day job. And then, as I mentioned, I'm also co-founder of Science Disrupt, which is a sort of 2 to 3 month old startup, which myself and my co-founder launched back in April. And what that is we really believe that the science industry is in dire need of change in the way it's communicated, how open it is, the way it's funded, the use of technology in their day-to-day tasks. So what we decided to do was start interviewing entrepreneurs, innovators, iconoclasts, people who really believe that the way we do science needs to change. And when we started doing this, it started to we got a lot of interest. People started saying, oh, you should, write about this, or is it just a podcast you guys have? And we ended up now, we do a lot of editorial. We're starting an events calendar, which kicks off in August. And we'll also be going to conferences around the world and bringing back that knowledge and covering what's going on in the world of science. So those are kind of my two hats, although it's quite nice that they interlink in a lot of different ways. So I've been at Ogilvy since it was last February, so almost a year and a half now. And it's not really been, I guess for most young women in tech, it's never really a traditional route into the role that they have. Most people, it's not like they go study engineering and then instantly work in technology and that's that, they're set. My sort of path, I guess, at school, I was really good at science and maths. I really loved science and maths, but I also really loved art and music and history. And in the end, it was kind of trying to toss a coin as to whether I went to art school or whether I went and studied maths and physics. So in the end, I decided, well, I can do my art and music as a hobby. It's maybe slightly harder to do maths and physics as a hobby. I really wanted to learn more. So I decided to go study, pure maths. It ended up being at St Andrews. But I dabbled in economics and Spanish and theoretical physics for a little bit. But I landed on pure maths. And basically pure maths is, a lot of people think that, oh yeah, you do loads of stuff with like calculus and stuff. But actually, because I did pure maths, I avoided probably what a lot of people consider the boring part of maths. So I spent a lot of time looking at patterns and prime numbers and cryptography, number theory, shapes, a thing called topology, which is all about the way 3D shapes. Anyway, I'm going on a tangent, but pure maths is awesome. And so I studied that for 4 years up in St Andrews. And while I was there, I really wanted to make the most of every summer holiday that I had, because I was like, well, I've got weeks and weeks off, and I'd worked ever since I was 14. I worked as a sort of sous chef in a small restaurant in my village. Kind of started off washing dishes and ended up doing the starters and desserts. So I was very used to working, and I loved working. So I had a job at uni as a waitress all the way through, but I also was like a brand manager for this careers website and all this sort of random stuff that students do. But then in my summers, I did internships. So in my first summer, I went to America and I worked as a chef in one of the kids camps that they do, which was an experience, quite a different way of working there than it is in the UK. Not as accepting of women being in power, but hey ho. So that was cool. And I met some amazing people there. It was a brilliant experience, and I really learned sort of tolerance, sort of having to just deal with people of various different backgrounds and ideas, and working extremely long hours. So it was a really good experience learning all of that, and also kind of different social circles and everything else. And then my second summer, I did door-to-door knocking. So I worked for a company called Champions Life Academy, and they partnered with charities, and they ran this sort of sales school to teach you how to sell and how to do partnerships and how to negotiate. And then for 11 weeks, you were out pounding the streets of, I was based in Lewisham, and I was the South London branch, and we were pounding the streets, knocking on doors. We'd knocked about 200 doors a day, trying to get people to donate to charities. So that was, I wouldn't do it again, but it was an amazing learning experience. If you ever want to know what's going on in Britain, politically, economically, socially, go and knock on people's doors, because you meet everyone. You know, anyone from the CEO of a business down to, you know, a single dad who's recently lost his job. You meet people of all religions. You meet horrible people, you meet nice people, and also just learning how to sell was probably the biggest thing that I got from that, and learning how to communicate and work with so many different people. And you're also living with your team, so it was quite an intense environment. So I did that my second summer. And then my third, by that point, I decided that I wanted to go into investment banking. So having a maths degree, we got targeted quite a lot by, you know, RBS and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. They came up to our uni quite a lot and said, hey, you do maths, come work for us. And they were very good at selling, and convinced me that investment banking was where my future lay. So I spent a lot of time, you know, over 2 years at uni, you know, going to talks. I came down to London for some conferences and experiences. I read absolutely crap loads, read the FT every day. I had blogs that I went to, loads and loads of research into how to get into investment banking, spent lots of time. I did a small internship with JP Morgan, and then I got onto their main intern scheme through various interviews. And I think I applied for about 15 banks, and they were the only one who replied to me. So I was like, yay. So my third summer, because Scotland has a 4-year degree, I went to JP Morgan, and I was like, this is my life set. I do this 12-week internship. All I have to do is get them to like me. They'll hire me at the end, and my life is set. I'm never going to need to interview again. All I need to do is move between banks, and, you know, job's a good one. And I got to about halfway through the summer, and I was doing the internship, you know, the one you read about in the newspapers, where, you know, I was getting up at 7 a.m. I wasn't leaving the office till about 1 a.m. You had breakfast, lunch, and dinner at your desk. It was very, very intense. And for the first half of it, the novelty of having, you know, this high flying job, and, you know, being able to get a taxi home and not have to pay for it, you know, all these kind of things, and also being in conversations, which I genuinely did find very interesting to do. You know, part of the job I was analysing shares and the markets and how they moved, and I still find that very fascinating. So the novelty of it was there for the first half, and then when it got just over halfway, I kind of had to start trying to admit to myself that I absolutely despised what I was doing. And that was a really, really difficult thing to do, because I'd spent all this time, you know, telling myself I wanted to be a banker. I put loads of work into it. The door-to-door knocking, everything, had all done it so that I could get this job. You know, it was like, well, what do I do now? I'm kind of thinking I don't like it. And it wasn't until I was about 2/3 of the way through that I finally said to myself, no, this is not for you, Gemma. You need to go find something else, and that's okay. And that felt like a really big deal to me. You know, I guess the whole sunk cost fallacy thing played a big role. And a lot of, you know, the people I was working with were having the same experience, but weren't admitting to themselves that they didn't want to do it, and were sticking to it. And no, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and all these sorts of things. So I literally Googled, you know, the Times top 100 grad jobs, and started going through that, and was like, no. And I worked on a project at JP Morgan, where I was, on a company called WPP. So I had to analyze all their shares, and it was just like a little project I was doing. It wasn't anything I think they just gave it to me as an extra job just to test me. I don't really know. But basically, I mucked it up massively. I spent 3 days on it. I'd like stayed at the office. I went in the weekend. I worked really, really hard on it because I wanted to prove myself. And I basically, one of the columns in my Excel sheet, I accidentally deleted. And so all my numbers, every single number in this like 70-page document were all wrong. And me being a maths person, that like killed me to my core. And they weren't very impressed by the document that I gave to them. Within 5 seconds of me handing it to them, they already knew the numbers were wrong, so they didn't read any of it. And I then had to spend hours changing it all. And so I decided that I absolutely hated WPP. I didn't know who they were, but I was like, I absolutely despise this company. They've ruined my internship at JP Morgan, blah, blah, blah. So I went home that night, realized that actually it was JP Morgan that I disliked, or maybe not JP Morgan, but the role itself I disliked. And I Googled the Times Top 100, and I saw that WPP were number 100 on the list. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe they're not so bad. Kind of forgot about it, finished my internship, had to sort of, I can't remember the exact point, but I think that was it. I Googled creative business jobs because I decided I liked art, I like music, maybe I should go do creative stuff, but I also really love business and I want to be in London. So I was like, creative business jobs, London, and advertising popped up. And I was like, okay, I've never watched Mad Men. I didn't know that like people hired an agency to do the work. I thought they just did it in the department in a business. Hey-ho. And so I started doing a lot of research into what sort of jobs existed. I realized that account management sounded like something I would like because I liked the project base, I liked the working with a client, I liked the idea of managing the whole business and understanding all the different parts. So I did exactly the same as I did for banking. I just spent lots and lots of time doing loads of research into, reading all these blogs. How do you get into advertising? Reading Campaign and Adweek and all different publications that exist in the industry to really understand what was going on. And I ended up, I got a few interviews, and my final interview I had was with a company called Ogilvy, which is the one I'm at right now, who are actually owned by WPP. So it was kind of all a bit funny. If you believed in fate, I don't, but if you did, maybe it would be like, oh my God. And hilariously, they were in Canary Wharf, and I actually used to walk past their building every day when I was at JP Morgan. And I always saw people wearing like normal clothes, like not wearing suits. And I used to always be really jealous of them. I was like, oh, they don't have to wear a suit. Like, oh, they're like, and then I came for the interview and I was like, oh my God, that's that building. Anyway, so if you believed in fate, maybe that's what you would be into. But anyway, so I went and worked at Ogilvy. I was on their sort of grad scheme for 2 months, and then I got a full-time role in account management. So I worked on the American Express account, and basically I was managing projects that came in to do with their marketing. So if they wanted, I don't know, a new brochure out to send out to everyone, then we would manage that, get the the designers and the artists and whatever. We then got the guys to mock it up, and then we get the production guys to create it. So I did that for from 2013 to the end of mid to the end of 2014, so just over a year. And again, was like, nope, this isn't for me. It's cool to do creative stuff, but I'm missing out on tech and science, which is my first love. So I was going to leave, like go back and study or something like that. I wasn't really entirely sure. And then I helped out with a project at Ogilvy. So I spent a lot of time doing loads of extracurricular stuff because I've always been a bit like, I want to make sure I'm progressing really fast. And I knew that by doing lots of different things. So I helped out with like societies. I helped out with pitches. I did like little extra stuff on my team. Like I sent around a weekly newsletter telling them about the news and what people should care about, all this sort of thing. And then I helped out with this conference called Lab Day, which the R&D innovation team ran. And I was like, hey, I love tech. Can I help you guys out? And they were like, absolutely, we need loads of help. So from April 2014 roughly through to September, I did that sort of in my spare time, helping them out. And then the day of Lab Day, it was all about Internet of Things. And the day finished, and I went up to Nicole, who was head of the R&D team, and I said, Nicole, I'm going to leave Ogilvy because this is what I want to do. I want to be working with startups, future technologies, and we were talking about virtual reality and connected fridges and God knows what else. And I was just like, this is more my scene. And she was like, no, don't leave, but we don't have a job. And I was like, ah. So anyway, that was like September. And then come November, I'd interviewed for a few places, but hadn't moved anywhere. And then Nicole phoned me up and said, our guy's leaving soon. If you stay on Ogilvy, I can just move you straight into our department when he goes. And then he left February 2015. I moved in, and now here I am. So, so as I said, it was kind of a random route. Like I did sales, I did a bit of marketing, I was a chef for a long time. I even did some teaching with Shell, teaching kids. So like, it wasn't like I was coding and building projects and having my own startup. Like, it wasn't what people, I think, expect that you have to do in order to get into tech. It was very much more just making sure I had loads and loads of different experience, so that when I came in, I could say, okay, I'm not a A-class coder. I'm not, you know, fully understanding deep learning to a really, you know, complex level, but I know all of this other stuff, and I'm really, really passionate. And that was the way that I was able to sell myself in. So yeah, and then the last year and a half, I did things like CodeFirstGirls, so I learned how to code, and then did a load of stuff in my spare time, making sure I could, you know, move forward with that and doing little extra projects. But realized that that wasn't for me. I don't want to be a coder, not full time anyway. I've gone to lots of conferences, so I spend a lot of time meeting lots of people and trying to work out what they do and seeing what roles they have and trying to get a feel for what the whole ecosystem is made out of. And obviously that's part of my role, but I was doing that even before I moved into it, just because I knew that that's where I'd be able to work out what I wanted. And yeah, just making sure that I'm always on the pulse and keeping reading and being really open to things that I thought I wouldn't like. I think that's one of the big things I've had. And so yeah, that's kind of been my journey as to where I am now. Oh, and then obviously Science Disrupt started in April, and that was kind of a passion project that we just decided, you know what, let's just stop talking about this and just do it. And doing a podcast is super easy, super cheap. You know, if you've got the sort of, in my role at Ogilvy, I'm really used to emailing people and saying, hey, can I have a meeting? Or, hey, can we talk? Or, you know, getting over that sort of, oh, they might not want to talk to me, or they might not, you know. So when it came to saying, oh, we need to get someone, you know, super senior or super famous or whatever to interview for our podcast, it didn't feel so scary, or whatever, sending an email or adding them on LinkedIn and saying, hey, we want to interview you. Are you keen? And you know, it's key to remember that most people are going to say yes. Most people are flattered by being asked advice or to do something. And I think that's, you know, that's been one of the big things that when I've been moving around, I've always just been like, oh, you do the thing that I like, can we chat? Or you know stuff about that, so can we chat? And that's been a big help as well, like kind of, I guess, mentoring and asking questions and being, I don't know, being open to other people. So cool. A typical day for me at Ogilvy in the R&D innovation team. It is very much the cliche when you say every day is different and, you know, there's no routine, blah, blah, blah. But I guess if I was to summarize, I get a lot of emails, so both from internally from within Ogilvy, so various different teams saying, hey, I'm working on this client, you know, we're doing a workshop about the future of travel, can you come and talk about this? Or I really want to inspire my client to use virtual reality in their new campaign, can you come and, or they just say, hey, my client wants to do something a bit different, but they don't really know, this is the brief, can you take a look at it? Get those sorts of ones internally. Externally, we get a lot of pitches from startups who want to work with Ogilvy and with our clients. So anything from, I don't know, social media analytics platforms, which is obviously very linked in to marketing, through to, you know, innovative billboard formats, you know, interactive media, whatever. But then even artists who want to work with us, but then even more crazy stuff like, oh, we have this, I don't know, artificially intelligent powered car or something. I don't know, loads of random stuff, because they know that we are looking for various different ideas, various different people to work with, and it's not always has to do anything to do with marketing. I mean, you see some of the most crazy advertising campaigns and you think, well, it evidently didn't come from, let's think about marketing. It was someone seeing something interesting and thinking, what could I do with that? So we get a lot of pitches in for people who want to come meet with us or show us what they do. So that's kind of, I guess, the email admin side of it. So a lot of it is finding new projects, finding new people to work with and pulling them all together. Then you have the sort of the research element of my job. So the way we split it up, there's only 4 of us in our team, so it's quite small considering, you know, we're looking at like future tech and innovation, which is like massive. So every 6 months we pick a research theme, and we, you know, everything we read, people we meet, conferences we go to, all have to link back to that theme so that we don't go too broad. So the one we're doing right now is future travel, tourism, and logistics. So getting people and things from A to B, basically. And then at the end of that research topic, we do this conference called Lab Day. So the next one's actually on Wednesday. So, and then after that, the next 6 months will kick off, and that's future health and well-being. So it means that I flag millions of articles, spend a lot of time reading through them, finding events, going along to events, meeting new people, like trying to work out actually what is the future of this, what are the issues with it, why should brands care, how can they get involved, can they pull that into product, can they pull it into marketing, should they be helping fund some of this stuff, you know, all these sorts of questions that it comes out of what is the future. So we do a lot of that. We have a physical lab space with lots of sort of toys. I mean, I call them toys, they're not toys, but like, I don't know, 3D printers, virtual reality headsets, got a lot of gesture control stuff. So we spend a lot of time showing people how to use the stuff and try and inspire them to either hack some stuff together or show their client or come up with a project and then pitch it into a new client, lots of different things. So we run that area. I'm trying to think what else we do. We do lots of different stuff. It's either meetings, research, or random. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we spend I've got a very flexible department, so I can work kind of wherever and whenever I want. It's very flexible. So I tend to go in around 10, tend to leave around 7. But sometimes I'm out at a conference all day. Sometimes I go to an event in the evening. Sometimes I travel a lot with work. So I was in Cannes, whenever it was, a week and a half ago. There was a big festival, big advertising festival there. They have an innovation part of that. So I was covering that as a journalist. We go to like South by Southwest and meet startups there. So it's very flexible. You're kind of working all the time, but a lot of the time it doesn't really feel like work. But it's the nature of what you do. You know, you can't, if you see an article when I'm commuting that might have something to do with work, then I'll read it. And then, you know, it's very embedded in my whole life, I guess. I'm actually quite introverted. And so a lot of people get this whole definition of introvert, extrovert wrong. So a lot of people think, oh, extrovert means you're confident and you like talking, blah, blah, and introvert means you're shy. But it's not that. It's to do with extrovert is that you get your energy from other people. You love, you know, getting ideas from people, connecting all together, blah, blah, blah. Whereas introvert, you're happy having your, you know, getting your energy from your own brain and sitting and reading and researching, blah, blah. And so my boss is very much an extrovert. She spends her whole day in meetings and finding crazy people and pulling together, and she loves making all those connections. I like doing that, but that's actually the hardest part of my job, is the sort of the networking element, even though I'm more than happy to chat to people. Because what I actually really love is sitting, writing, reading stuff. When I go to a conference, I love just sitting in the sessions and trying to think about why that's interesting for what I do. Whereas Nicole, my boss, she'll get restless within a session within 5 minutes, and she'll be off going to the coffee shop because she knows there's going to be someone interesting there to talk to. So we kind of act as a bit of a tag team in a lot of ways. But, you know, a large part of my job is still meeting lots of people and pulling them all together. And it is about being a bit of a natural connector, which, you know, works really, really well for women, because we tend to be a lot more open to, I don't know, random conversation in a way that's, I guess, less, what am I going to get from you right now? What's the exchange? She kind of can't really be like that when you're coming up with new and random ideas. And then that's not to say guys aren't good at that, but it does work well for women. I mean, we were a group of 3 women before April, and now it's 2 women, 2 guys. So you know, for a tech team, that's it works quite nicely. We talk a lot about, you know, what Uber and Airbnb did. They didn't do this incremental change. They didn't think, how can we make taxis or hotels slightly better? What they did was they went right back to the start and said, why would a person get a taxi, or why would a person book a hotel? And try and understand you know, what we as people are looking for in that service. And then they built it from the ground up. So that's what we kind of see as true disruption. So we're looking at how that, well, what industries need that and what might that look like. So that's a lot of our research as well. So we're doing that right now. We're more or less finished that one now, although we're always interested in talking to random people about anything. But the next one is future health and well-being. So we're going to be looking at everything from, you know, apps that you can collect your own data and then self-diagnose, through to personalized medicine, through to biotechnologies and gene editing, through to, you know, how can we live forever? These sorts of questions. And then also this whole idea of wellness that's been very popular over the past couple of years. So we'll be doing that until, well, we were going to just do it till December, but it's such a broad topic, we're thinking it might even run until March. So yeah, that's how those work. I mean, by the end of the 6 months, you'd be surprised at how much you can learn about something in relatively short period of time. And you've got to remember as well that, you know, tech and science moves very, very quickly. So even what you're talking about at the start of the 6 months has almost changed quite a bit by the time you get to the end. And, you know, you sound a bit, I think people who work in, especially in the sort of innovation roles and looking at future technologies, can be a bit, oh, that's so last year, you know, when realistically it hasn't actually kicked off yet. But because a lot of people in, I guess, in those circles, or, well, it's not really circles because it's huge, but are speaking about these at conferences. So an example, for instance, when we first started doing travel and technology, obviously self-driving cars was like a really big theme. So we started looking into it, and one of the things I was quite fascinated about was this a thing called the trolley problem, which is it's an ethical, philosophical problem that it kind of goes like this. There's a train going along a track, you are standing at this lever, and you have to decide which of two tracks you're going to put the train along. So it's going along one track, it has to go between the left one or the right one, and you have to decide which one it goes on. It can't, it's not automatically on one, you have to make a decision. But on one track, there's one person there, and if it goes along it, it will kill them. And on the other track, there's 10 people, and if it goes along that, it will kill them, all of them, all dead. And you have to make a decision as to which track you put the train on. And, you know, you could argue this whole utilitarian approach of you would kill one person to save 10, but then you think about, well, what if you know the person versus the others? What if the person is young and the 10 people are old? All these different questions that comes up with that. So this problem has been for years in philosophy. And now when it comes to building systems for self-driving cars, it's like, well, how do you tell the car what decision to make when it you know, if it has to swerve a lorry and kill one person or hit the lorry and, you know, anyway, the point is that how do you solve that problem? So that's like one of the big themes that we came across, you know, at the start of the research. And now we've got to the end, it's now moved beyond that to even more philosophical questions that I find even more fascinating. And I'm like, oh, the trolley problem is so last year, like I've already spoke about that. Whereas that's totally new to a lot of people. So what's brilliant about just doing the 6 months is you cover a lot of ground, but you build upon those ideas throughout. And it means that even in 6 months' time, you know, the last one we did was the future of retail. Before that, it was startup ecosystem. And it means that every time I see something about future retail or startup ecosystem, I'm still reading about it and going, oh, that's build up on that, or oh, that's move forward, or blah, blah, blah. So you don't stop researching. You kind of just keep going. But the point is that you are translating that research back to the business in that 6 months. And I love the change because, I mean, if you're the sort of person that's into future tech, you're reading this stuff anyway. It's not a chore to go and read an article about, you know, space travel. That's awesome. And I'm not to say that, you know, there's lots of things about my job. There's a lot of admin. There's, you know, there's lots of things that aren't fun. But I count myself very lucky to get to do something so interesting, and be paid to do it. You know, I mean, that's incredible. I started doing proper public speaking and speaking at conferences last February, or it was, well, last March was my first big one. And I was sent to Dubai 9 days into my new job, being like, off you go and talk about this department and tell people why they should innovate within large organizations, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I mean, I'm 9 days in, so I don't know that much about what you guys do. And it's like, no, that's fine, don't worry about it. And I was like, okay. And I said to my boss, hey, can you like read over my presentation? Can I practice it to you? Because I had like a 40-minute slot. So it was like a long time. As it's still to this day the longest presentation I've ever done in front of a large audience, I mean. And she was like, yeah, no bother. And then last minute, she ended up going to Barcelona. Well, sorry, I can't read your presentation. You'll be fine. And I was obviously like, are you kidding me? And I've always really wanted to do public speaking, so I was really happy about the opportunity. I was really excited by it, but I'd never done it before in front of a large audience, and especially not talking about this theme. But in hindsight, the best thing ever was just getting thrown at the deep end and just having to go do it, and being okay with the first one might not be your best performance ever, but there's only one way to learn and there's only one way to practice, and that's just going and doing it. So, you know, I arrived in Dubai, we had to do this dress rehearsal. The room had like, I think it had like 700 or 800 capacity, and it was obviously empty at this point, and I'm just walking about like, oh my God. So I was very nervous, but luckily I was early on in the next morning, so it got over and done with very quickly. But I loved it. I got off stage and the adrenaline was insane. I just wanted to get back up. I loved that people wanted to come talk and discuss what had been said and ask questions. So I really got the bug the minute more or less the minute I stepped on stage. I was like, there's actually a recording of me. And the first thing I do is I walk on stage and I go, wow, this is awesome. And I think it was me in my head going, oh my God, but it was the way it came out. So anyway, so I think the first piece of advice would be, if you get the opportunity to go do it, just do it. Don't think, oh, I've not done it before, or I don't know what I'll talk about, or just say yes and you'll find a way and it'll be fine. And people aren't evil, you know, the audience are there to listen, they're there to learn. And especially if you're at like a meetup or a conference that's maybe not as business focused, people are, you know, they've chosen to spend their time there. They want to hear what you have to say. So I think it's remembering that they're not going to eat you alive, you know. So that would be my first advice would be sort of just jump in, both feet first. My second one would be just to try and find as many opportunities as possible to do it. So, you know, don't always chase the massive conferences or the ones that are perfect for you. Like if you get the opportunity to speak about, I don't know, something a bit different, like for instance, I'm actually not the biggest fan of talking about diversity in tech, because I believe instead of talking about the lack of diversity, we should just, as we're doing, talk about what people do and the fact that they're female or, you know, from a different ethnic background or different sexual orientation will just come through. Like you don't have to stand up and, you know, declare yourself a certain thing and complain about the stats. So, but to begin with, I got a lot of, because I'm a female and I work in tech, I got a lot of people saying, hey, Gemma, can you come talk at this conference and can you talk about the lack of diversity? And as much as I was like, I don't really love talking about it, it was an opportunity to practice. And it was also an opportunity to meet other people at that conference and then speak to them and hone my craft, I guess. So that would be my second thing, is just don't be too picky, but, you know, don't do anything. But make sure you're getting a broad range of experience. Don't only talk about one thing. Make sure you talk about lots of different topics, because then instead of you being this sort of robotic, you know, saying the same thing over and over again, you get the opportunity to think about talking about lots of different topics, and you don't have to sort of script it as much. You become a lot more comfortable just having a conversation, and it means that you can go in panels, you can moderate, instead of just practicing a talk with PowerPoint slides and then doing it and then getting off the stage, which, I mean, I love doing, but it means you have more opportunity to do other things. And I think as well, it's also just, a lot of people are really, really, I mean, there's a stat, isn't it, that, you know, more people are worried about public speaking than they are deaf in the UK. And I'm aware that I am in the minority and that I absolutely love public speaking. It doesn't scare me in the same way that I know it scares a lot of other people. I get nervous, I get butterflies, but it's not I cannot do this. I don't get that debilitating fear. But I think, you know, one of the biggest pieces of advice I got given before, because I do get nervous, as you know, that's totally normal, was saying that when you get nervous before a talk, it's basically a biological thing. So it's like fight or flight mode gets activated within your body, and so you start sweating, you get dry mouth, all these sorts of things when you get scared. And it's because basically the resources in the body are going to places like your muscles so that you can fast activate running or punching or whatever, right? So I learned this and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I was thinking about it and I was like, oh, so instead of it being like, oh my God, I'm really frightened, it's your body going, I'm ready to do something. And that just really switched it in my head. So when I start feeling nervous and when I start getting clammy hands and I twitch and I kind of hop between feet and all these sorts of, loads of people have different things when they're nervous. My way of, I kind of say to myself, no, Gemma, this is you getting ready. This is your body like powering up, you know, I don't know. And that kind of helps with the nerves. But everyone has different ways of dealing with it, but that's my way of dealing with it. And yeah, I'm just practicing and having a conversation. You know, I read Chris Anderson, who's the founder of TED. He wrote this book, and it's I think it's like Talk Like TED or something, and it's about how to do speak like TED speakers. And he wrote this thing, and it's really beautiful. He was talking about when you're doing a talk, you are there for the audience, right? So you're giving a gift to the audience. Your talk is a gift to the audience. And it's not that you're like, you know, a king and you're giving your people. It's that you're there almost as a servant to them and you're giving them something. And what he said as well was, he said it's all about planting a seed. So it's not about going up and saying, this is everything about this topic and I need to like get it all out and I need to tell you loads of stuff and I'm going to loads of detail. Instead, use the building blocks in the audience's mind. So what do they already know? And explain what you're saying in their language and plant a seed so that they can then go on to understand what it is you're saying. So I know it sounds a bit like, I don't know, broad, but like, for instance, I talk a lot about science disruption. And, you know, the minute you start talking about changing the world of science, you open up like a million can of worms. And every time I get asked to talk about it, I'm like, oh my God, I could talk about this and this and this and this and this and this. And that's like the wrong way to do it because people just switch off. They get bored with that. You know, shorter talks are my favorite. I like doing short talks with Q&A because, you know, at the end of the day, you want to know what the audience want to know, not just say what you think is best. So instead, it's about touching on things, either one thing in a way that gets the point across and they can then go, oh, what does that mean for everything else? Or lightly touching a few things, which then makes the sort of idea flower in their mind in their own way. And I think those make the more interesting talks, and I try and do that when I'm crafting what I'm saying, because the last thing you want to do is get up on stage and people switch off and, you know, don't listen, because it's sort of a wasted opportunity. Yeah, I think that's probably all my off the top of my head, but I think it's remembering that you've been asked to do it for a reason, or when you've said, can I talk? And they've said yes for a reason. People want to hear from you, but also equally remembering who is it that you're talking to and what are they going to gain from what you say, and trying to make sure you have that exchange that works. And for me, that makes a really good speaker. How many people have a truly unique idea? I mean, that's one of the biggest things people say to me. They say, oh, I really, really, really want to talk, but I don't know what to talk about. I don't have, what am I going to say that's different? And it's like, well, you know, obviously you are going to have something that's different because you're a unique person. So you're going to have your unique perspective on something. So either it's like, well, think about it from your perspective. What do you think? Or think about all the different stuff that's out there and find a way to bring it together cohesively that then brings on to a new point. It's not about, you know, you can't just win a Nobel Prize instantly. You'd have to do all this work and think about something really specific and blah, blah, blah. Unique ideas are very difficult to come by, and they're not expected from every speaker. What is expected is either a unique take on something or being able to give the audience something so that when they leave, they feel more intelligent or more armed to go talk about something, or empowered to have a discussion about something. I mean, that for me is the biggest thing. If I can tell the audience something and then somewhat in the bar, two of them can chat after and say, oh, what did you think of it? Oh, I didn't know that before. Oh, isn't that interesting? Oh, do you know what? I do this job and actually that's not relevant at all and I disagree. That's brilliant. And that's not me coming in and saying, oh, I have this unique idea that no one has ever said before. It's me going, oh, I read this thing, or I heard this, or I learned this, and actually this is what I think. I think that's more valuable. When I want to do something or when I think of an idea, I can be really bad for planning it out for ages and ages and ages, going, I need to learn this thing, I need to do this Udacity course online, I need to read this book, I need to talk to this many people in order to really get straight what I want to do and then do it. And, you know, you could be doing research for 8 years, you know, and I don't know, there's been a lot of ideas and projects that I've ended up not doing because I spent so much time, you know, wanting to make sure that I'm right for it or ready for it. And that's, you know, that's not helpful at all. So so it's myself and my boyfriend, Lawrence, who our relationship is more or less based on moaning about science. So that was kind of where it came from. And so I think, you know, it came from a passion, and it came from a place that we, you know, kind of felt like a difference had to be made. So me obviously working in tech and startup land, he's a PhD, so he works in research. And we were always looking at each other's jobs and going, well, why don't you just do that? Or him going, oh, you can just do that? I didn't realize that was like a thing. We don't do that. And we kind of realized that why is science not more like tech in the way that it's, you know, the community, co-creation, openness, diversity, blah, blah, blah. And besides, like alongside that, obviously I work in advertising, so a big part of that's communication. Well, all of it is communications, marketing, how you sell stuff and how you talk about stuff. And I've always loved science ever since. I don't remember not loving science, basically. It's my biggest passion. And I've always been really, really frustrated with some of the ways it's communicated to the public, to kids, mainly to adults. That's the thing that I'm most concerned about. I think there's some brilliant schemes for young people, STEM in schools, making sure they have trips and, you know, experiences and blah, blah, blah. But I think for, you know, 25-year-olds who didn't study science at uni, don't really care about it, have a normal job, when are they ever going to know about the amazing things that are going on in science? Or crucially, how can they be informed enough to take part in important conversations like vaccinations, for instance, or climate change? So I think there's massive issues in terms of science communication. And through Ogilvy, I now get asked to speak at different conferences, and a lot of time I get asked to speak about innovation at Ogilvy. And I decided I didn't really like talking about that anymore. I got a little bit, I felt like I was saying the same thing over and over, and I was like, you know what, I'd rather talk about science. Can I talk about communication in science? So I've done quite a bit of that as well. And a lot of people have been saying, oh, do you write about this? And I was like, no, I just kind of talk at conferences about it. You know, I find it interesting. So that was happening. Mine and Lawrence's conversations were happening, and we just spent a lot of time going, we need to do something with this. I don't know what. And it was just, okay, let's do a podcast. He already does a podcast with some of his PhD friends talking about, you know, actual discoveries in science. And he loves the medium. He listens to podcasts all the time. They're on in the background. I was more of a novice towards it. But I'd listen to Serial, you know, as most people, kind of the introduction to podcasts was through Serial. So, and as you can probably imagine, I quite like talking. So I was like, oh, it's an opportunity to do more talking. Yay. And we knew that we really wanted to meet other interesting people. And we thought, well, that's a really easy way to meet people, by going, hey, can we interview you? Instead of going, can we just talk to you? And that was kind of how it was born. So we just decided it was just going to be a podcast. We do it once every 2 weeks. We sat and did a little brainstorm, went for dinner. We had a Chinese, sat and did a brainstorm. And, you know, started emailing people and just saying, hey, you know, mostly using the network that we already had, and then asking them, do you know anyone else? And it kind of just grew from there. And I think when you hit on something that you're passionate about and you find other people who are passionate about it, finding a network is actually a lot easier than a lot of people think. But I also use things like I'm on Ada's list, ADA, like Ada Lovelace, which is a women in tech groups. I put it out there and I got loads of stuff through that. I'm on a few science groups, so we put it out and said, hey, is anyone interested? That all came back. And actually what happened is we got too much interest, and we realized that it was something a bit more than just a podcast. Although it's a good podcast and we're really proud of it and we've got brilliant content, but we were like, let's do something more. So we started doing written interviews, we started writing opinion pieces, and we're now starting a 10-part event series that will be in London and hopefully keep them all free. The first one's free. It's all about bringing like startups, academics, VCs, government, all the different parts of the ecosystem of the science industry together and being like, look, there's this problem, but there's this solution, and how can you guys find a way to make that work? Because yeah, I mean, the science industry is kind of like the tech industry, but like 20 years ago, in the sense that it's very, very closed off. It's archaic in so many ways. It's not open. A lot of scientific research you have to pay to read, for instance, which is crazy. Science communication is not great. You're not getting, there's a thing called the brain drain, which you have a lot of people, like myself, who studied science at uni, but end up going off doing something totally different because they don't fancy going into research because it's bureaucratic, slow, not for me, all that sort of thing. So it's how do we help make that change? And we believe a lot of it is open conversation and journalism and talking about it. So that's kind of what we do. But I mean, the challenges we've had mainly is time, finding time, because we're not, at the moment, the money we're making is only tiding us over. So it's paying for the drinks at the event, for instance, or our website, or our microphones, or editing. We're not making any profit. So we can't, it's not like at the moment, we're not in a position to quit our jobs and go and, have our own startup, whatever. So it is on the side. So time, I would say, is probably the biggest challenge. Finding the time to do things, finding the motivation at midnight when you have to send out your newsletter at 8 the next morning, to not go, oh, sod it, we'll just send out at lunchtime, and go, no, we need consistency, let's get it out. Being able to find time to just do social media, to make sure you're posting enough on Twitter to grow your audience, to have meetings, send emails to people. But we grew our team, for instance. We got 2 other people, Iona and Ignacio, who are also, we found, were equally passionate about what we were doing, and we're like, oh, can we get involved? And to begin with, I felt really kind of like, oh, are we kind of just asking them to do stuff? That doesn't feel, we're not paying them, and but when we realized that they're doing it for the same reasons we are, and we're all, I think it's being a bit more open to that sort of mentality that very much exists in tech startup land, and maybe doesn't exist in other places. So that's, and now we're at the point where we've applied for quite a lot of funding. We're hoping to possibly become part of a podcast network in the States, which would mean it's kind of like ITV, but for podcasts, like they have channels. So it means you can get income through ads and through cross-posting and grow your audience and things like that. So we've got various different ways that we're trying to now monetize and find ways to grow. And then I guess the next thing is trying to work out how we carve out more time. So do we, become freelance, or do we, one of us do it full time and the other one have a job? And, how do we find a way of making it work when we both also love what we do in our day jobs? So, but that's the kind of exciting thing. And it's just being open and carving out time, but also carving out time to not do anything and make sure your brain doesn't explode. I'm not very good at that. Lawrence has to remind me sometimes. But yeah, it's fun. I recommend it. My biggest thing I always say when I get asked about, careers and advice and stuff, and is my little phrase. Well, it's not my phrase, but I always say, don't do your time. So you get a lot of this especially if you're in a grad job, or entry level, whatever, and people, when you feel like you're doing really well and you're like, I want to move up, I want to try new things, I want to take on new responsibilities, blah blah blah. A lot of people say, no, do your time. Just, you've only been here 6 months, or you've only been here a year, or you got a little bit more to do. Just do your time and you'll move up. And someone said this to me when I was getting quite unhappy being an account manager. I love Ogilvy, but it wasn't right for me. And I kept saying, oh, can I move up? I'm ready to be promoted. I'm good at this job. Maybe if I move up, I'll be happier and I have more responsibility, or maybe I need to move into a new department. I don't know what it is, but there's something not right, and I know I'm capable of so much more, and my potential isn't being reached. And I had quite a few people say to me, no, you just have to do your time. You're an account exec for 2 years, then you move up, blah, blah, blah. And I thought about it and I was like, that is such a waste. I am not doing my time. I'm not in from prison. I'm capable of a lot more than this. And if they can't see it, then I'm going to have to go find someone who can. And I remember my mum's my best friend. I still phone her all the time. And she's like my agony aunt and my counsellor and my best friend. And I remember when I was unhappy and wanted to change, I kept saying to her, I was like, I just need someone to trust me. I just need someone who sees me as capable of doing more and just let me do it. I need someone to appreciate that I am young, I am new to this, but I've got more to give. And I was lucky to find Nicole, my current boss, who she trusts me more than I trust myself. And that's brilliant. And I think trying to find that person, whether it's your boss, whether it's a mentor, whether it's, I don't know, someone who you can just go for a coffee and get some advice from, I don't know, it's really important to make sure you get that, because that's, you need it when it comes to, I don't know, moving forward. And doing your time, I think, is just the biggest waste. And people need to be okay with feeling like, a lot of people say, oh, millennials, young people, blah, 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 they're so entitled. They come in with their smartphones and their university degrees or not degrees and say, oh, I should be moved up. I'm good at this job. I understand technology better than you, whatever. And I would say, actually, no, it's not about being entitled. It's about being empowered. We know what we're capable of. We do have a lot more skills than people who have been in the job longer, because we've grown up with the internet. We've grown up with Photoshop and video editing and blogging and social media. All these things are natural to younger people. And it means we do have a lot more to offer. So it's not that we have loads of experience, but we're T-shaped, as opposed to being, I don't know what the alternative is, but we do have a lot to offer. And I think it's about understanding what you're good at, being confident in yourself, and being able to say, no, it's time for me to make a change, and I know I'm going to be good at it. I am not doing my time in this role just to then be promoted and do the same thing with slightly more responsibility. And yeah, it's a confidence thing. I appreciate it. I'm lucky that I have a lot of confidence, but I hope that more people could, I don't know, accept that idea that doing your time isn't actually the best thing. I think that's from a generation above us.